I watched from my kitchen window as that infernal woman maneuvered her gaudy 30-foot cabin cruiser into my private boat slip. And I knew my peaceful life at Sandpiper Cove Marina Estates in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, was about to become a living nightmare. My name is Derek Nichols, and I had worked my entire adult life to afford this waterfront property. The condo itself was modest, a 2-bedroom unit with hurricane-resistant windows and a view of the intracoastal waterway that made every mortgage payment worthwhile. But the real treasure was the private boat slip that came with the deed, a 35-foot berth where my pride and joy, a 28-foot Sea Ray Sundancer named Second Wind, had been docked for the past 3 years. I had saved for a decade to buy that boat, sacrificing vacations and fancy dinners, working overtime at my job as a marine surveyor to make it happen. The Sea Ray was not just a boat. It was my escape, my therapy, my weekend sanctuary where the stress of inspecting other people's vessels melted away under the Florida sun. The woman now parking her boat in my slip was Sharon Pemberton, the newly elected president of the Sandpiper Cove Homeowners Association. She had moved into the community 6 months ago and immediately began her campaign of neighborhood domination. Sharon was everything you would expect from a Karen stereotype, mid-50s with an asymmetrical blonde bob that looked like she had asked for the manager's haircut, oversized sunglasses perpetually perched on her head, and an expression of constant disapproval etched into her tanned face. She drove a white Mercedes SUV with a custom license plate that read HOA Queen, which should have been my first warning sign. I rushed out of my condo and down the wooden dock, my boat shoes slapping against the weathered planks. "Excuse me, Sharon, what are you doing? That's my slip." She looked up from securing her mooring lines, her lips pursed in that way that suggested I was the one being unreasonable. "Actually, Derek, if you had attended the last HOA meeting, you would know that we have implemented a new rotation system for boat slips. This slip has been reassigned to me for the next quarter." My blood pressure spiked. "Rotation system. Sharon, I own this slip. It is on my deed. I paid an extra $75,000 for this unit specifically because it included this boat slip. You cannot just reassign it." She finished tying off her boat with infuriating calmness. "The HOA has the authority to manage all common areas and amenities for the benefit of the entire community. Your deed grants you access to a boat slip, not necessarily this specific one. This is not a common area. It is a private slip that belongs to my property." I could hear my voice rising, but I could not help it. 3 years of peaceful boat ownership were being violated right before my eyes. Sharon stepped off her boat onto my dock, brushing past me with a folder full of papers. "I have already moved your boat to slip 42. It is a perfectly adequate space. You should be grateful I did not cite you for the improper storage of life jackets I noticed during the relocation. That is a violation of Section 12.4 of our updated bylaws." I stood there, momentarily speechless. She had moved my boat, without my permission, without my knowledge. I sprinted down the dock towards slip 42, which was in the far corner of the marina, next to the pump-out station and partially shaded by an old live oak tree that dropped sap and bird droppings constantly. Sure enough, there was my second wind, crammed into a slip that was barely large enough for her, the fenders compressed against the pilings. I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer, Bill Henderson, who had handled my real estate closing. His secretary said he was in court but would call me back. I took photos of everything, documenting Sharon's boat in my slip, my boat in the inadequate slip 42, the measurements, the location. I had learned from my years as a marine surveyor that documentation was everything. That evening, Bill called me back. "Derek, I have reviewed your deed. You are absolutely correct. That boat slip is deeded property, not a common area. The HOA has no authority to reassign it. I will draft a cease and desist letter tonight, and we will have this sorted out by the end of the week. I felt a wave of relief. Thanks, Bill. I knew I was not crazy. You are not crazy, but I have to warn you, HOA disputes can get messy. This Sharon woman sounds like she is on a power trip. Document everything. Do not engage in any confrontations, and let me handle the legal side. I followed his advice. For the next 3 days, I documented Sharon's boat in my slip, took daily photos, and kept my second wind in the inadequate slip 42. Bill sent the cease and desist letter via certified mail and email. I thought that would be the end of it. I was so very wrong. On Friday afternoon, I left work early to take the boat out. The weather was perfect, 78 degrees with a light breeze, and I had plans to cruise down to Hollywood Beach, grab dinner at a waterfront restaurant, and forget about this entire HOA nightmare. But when I arrived at the marina, slip 42 was empty. My boat was gone. I ran down the dock, checking every slip, thinking maybe the marina staff had moved it for some reason. Nothing. I burst into the marina office, where the dockmaster, an older Cuban man named Julio who had been working there for 20 years, looked up from his desk with genuine confusion. "Derek, what is wrong? My boat is gone. It was in slip 42 this morning." Julio's face fell. "The HOA president. She came this morning with a tow boat company. She had papers, said the boat was abandoned and the HOA was authorized to remove it. I told her it was your boat, that you are here all the time, but she had official-looking documents. She said you had been notified." What was I supposed to do? She is the HOA president. My hands were shaking. Where did they take it? Some impound lot, I think. The company was called Coastal Marine Towing. I have their card here. He rummaged through his desk and handed me a business card. I called Coastal Marine Towing immediately. A board woman answered. "Coastal Marine, how can I help you? You towed my boat this morning from Sandpiper Cove Marina. I need to know where it is." Name: Derek Nichols. The boat is a Sea Ray Sundancer, registration FL 4829BG. I heard typing. "Yeah, we have it at our storage facility in Dania Beach. That will be $850 for the tow, plus $90 per day storage to retrieve it." $850. That boat was not abandoned. It was illegally towed. "Sir, we had proper authorization from the property management company. If you have a dispute, you need to take it up with them. The fees stand. I want to come get my boat right now. Storage facility closes at 5. You can come tomorrow morning at 8, but you will need to pay all fees before release." I looked at my watch. It was already 4:45, and Dania Beach was at least 30 minutes away in traffic. "I will be there at 8 tomorrow morning, and I am not paying a dime. My boat was stolen." I hung up and immediately called Bill Henderson. This time I got his cell phone. When I explained what had happened, there was a long silence on the other end. "Derek, they towed your boat, after receiving my cease and desist letter." "Yes." "And now they want almost $1,000 to give it back, plus $90 a day storage. Do not pay anything. This is theft, conversion, and about a dozen other torts. I am going to file an emergency motion on Monday morning. In the meantime, go to the storage facility tomorrow and document everything. Take photos, get their refusal to release your boat in writing if possible. We are going to bury this HOA." That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about my boat sitting in some impound lot, exposed to the elements, accruing ridiculous fees. I had purchased special marine covers, kept the upholstery pristine, waxed the hull regularly. The Sea Ray was my baby, and it was being held hostage by a woman on a power trip. Saturday morning, I arrived at Coastal Marine Towing's facility at 7:50. It was a grim lot surrounded by chain-link fence, filled with boats in various states of disrepair. Some looked like they actually had been abandoned, covered in grime and algae, their hulls showing years of neglect. My Sea Ray sat in the front row, looking completely out of place with her gleaming white hull and pristine condition. A heavy-set man in a stained polo shirt emerged from a trailer that served as the office. "We open at 8. I am here for my boat, the Sea Ray Sundancer." He looked me up and down. "You got the money. I am not paying anything. That boat was illegally towed. I want it released immediately," he shrugged. "No payment, no boat. Your bill is already up to $940. $940. You said $850 plus $90 per day. Tow was yesterday. You were a no-show. That is 2 days storage, plus we added a processing fee." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "I am documenting this. I am Derek Nichols, the legal owner of that Sea Ray. I am here to retrieve my property, which was stolen from its legal mooring. You are refusing to release it without payment of fabricated fees. Is that correct?" The man's face hardened. "You cannot record me without permission." Florida is a two-party consent state for audio recordings where there is an expectation of privacy. This is a business transaction in a public area. I am well within my rights. Now, are you refusing to release my boat? Unless you pay the fees, yeah, I am refusing. Now get out of here before I call the cops for trespassing. Please do call the police. I would love to file a theft report." He went back into his trailer and slammed the door. I took extensive photos and video of my boat, the facility, the condition of everything. I noted that my boat cover was missing, and one of the fenders was no longer attached. After 20 minutes, no police came, so I left and drove directly to the Fort Lauderdale Police Department. The officer at the desk listened to my story with a sympathetic but ultimately unhelpful expression. "Sir, this sounds like a civil dispute. We cannot get involved in HOA matters or towing disagreements." "It is not a disagreement. My property was stolen. I have a deed proving I own that boat slip. The HOA had no authority to tow my boat." "I understand your frustration, but unless we have clear evidence of criminal intent, this is something you need to resolve through the courts. File a complaint with the county and document everything. If your lawyer says it is theft, they can help you pursue criminal charges through the state attorney's office." I left the police station feeling defeated but more determined than ever. Bill had said Monday, so Monday it would be. The weekend dragged by. I spent hours reviewing my deed, the HOA bylaws, and every piece of documentation I had about my property. The original HOA governing documents, filed in 1987, made no mention of any authority to reassign deeded boat slips. Sharon's new bylaws that she referenced were, as far as I could tell, fabricated or at least not properly voted on or recorded with the county. Monday morning, Bill filed an emergency motion for the return of my property. We also filed a lawsuit against the HOA, Sharon Pemberton personally, and Coastal Marine Towing for conversion, theft, trespass, and violations of Florida's Homeowner Association Act. The filing felt good, like I was finally fighting back. That afternoon, I received a certified letter from the HOA. My hands were shaking as I opened it. "Dear Mr. Nichols, due to your continued violations of HOA regulations, accumulation of unpaid fines, and harassment of HOA board members, your boat has been deemed abandoned property under Section 18.7 of the Community Bylaws. As such, The HOA has exercised its right to dispose of the abandoned property to recover outstanding fees. Your vessel was sold at auction this morning for the sum of $4,200. After deducting towing fees, storage fees, administrative fees, and outstanding HOA violations totaling $6,800, you owe the HOA an additional $2,600. Payment is due within 15 days to avoid additional penalties and potential lien on your property. Sincerely, Sharon Pemberton, HOA President. I read the letter 3 times, each time feeling like I was going to vomit. They sold my boat. My $45,000 boat was sold at auction for $4,000, and they claimed I still owed them money. I called Bill Henderson, and for the first time in our professional relationship, I heard him curse. They did what? They sold it, after I filed a motion. Derek, this is beyond the pale. This is criminal. We are going to the police, the state attorney, and I am filing for emergency sanctions. Sharon Pemberton is going to regret the day she met you. We drove together to the Fort Lauderdale Police Department, this time armed with the deed, the cease and desist letter, the court filing, and the HOA's letter admitting they sold my boat. We met with a detective in the Property Crimes Division, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s named Detective Maria Gonzalez. She read through everything carefully, making notes. Mr. Nichols, I am going to be straight with you. This is definitely over the line. An HOA cannot seize and sell deeded property like this. I am going to open an investigation for grand theft and potentially racketeering if we find a pattern of this behavior. Racketeering? I asked. If the HOA president is using her position to steal and sell property for personal gain, or to benefit the HOA coffers improperly, that could constitute organized criminal activity. We have actually seen this before with corrupt HOA boards. They are like little fiefdoms, and some people let the power go to their heads. She looked at Bill. I assume you are pursuing civil remedies as well, aggressively, Bill said. I am also filing complaints with the Florida Bar against any attorneys who advised the HOA on this action, assuming they used one. Detective Gonzalez nodded. Give me a few days to investigate. I want to talk to the towing company, find out who bought the boat at auction, and interview Miss Pemberton. In the meantime, Mr. Nichols, do not engage with her directly. Let us handle this. Over the next week, I learned the full extent of Sharon's scheme. Detective Gonzalez discovered that there had never been a legitimate auction. Sharon's brother-in-law, a man named Frank Russo who lived in Miami, had purchased my boat for $4,200 in a private sale that Sharon called an auction. Frank had already listed the boat for sale online for $38,000. When Detective Gonzalez contacted him, Frank claimed he had no idea the boat was stolen, that his sister-in-law had told him it was a legitimate HOA foreclosure sale. The investigation also revealed that Sharon had done this before. In the past 6 months since taking over the HOA, she had seized and sold 3 other boats, 2 jet skis, and a classic car, all claiming they were abandoned or in violation of HOA rules. She had pocketed over $15,000 personally from these sales, with another $20,000 going into an HOA account that she alone controlled. The previous owners had either not fought back, not knowing their legal rights, or had been worn down by the process and given up. Detective Gonzalez arrested Sharon Pemberton on a Thursday morning at her condo. I was not there, but Julio the dockmaster told me it was quite a scene. Sharon screamed about harassment and abuse of power, threatened to sue the police department, and demanded to speak to the mayor. She was charged with grand theft, racketeering, fraud, and several other felonies. Her bond was set at $50,000. The arrest made the local news. HOA president arrested in boat theft scheme was the headline on the Sun-Sentinel website. My phone rang constantly with calls from other homeowners who had been victimized by Sharon, reporters wanting interviews, and even a producer from a true crime podcast. Bill Henderson worked with Detective Gonzalez to recover my boat from Frank Russo. Frank, facing potential charges as an accessory, cooperated fully and returned the Sea Ray without argument. When I finally got to see her again, 2 weeks after she had been stolen, I nearly cried. Someone had scratched the hull, the interior cushions were stained, and the electronics had been removed, probably by Frank to sell separately. "We will get you compensated for all of this," Bill assured me. "The HOA has insurance, and we are also going after Sharon's personal assets." "You are going to be made whole, Derek." The civil lawsuit moved forward on a parallel track with the criminal case. Bill filed motions for summary judgment, arguing that the facts were so clear that no trial was necessary. The HOA tried to defend itself, claiming Sharon had acted independently and without board approval, but Bill subpoenaed meeting minutes and emails that showed at least 2 other board members, Patricia Underwood and Richard Chen, had known about and approved the boat seizure scheme. The judge was not amused. During a hearing in early spring, Judge Thomas McAllister looked over his glasses at the HOA's attorney, a nervous young man who clearly wished he was anywhere else, and said, "Counselor, I have been on the bench for 22 years, and this is one of the most egregious abuses of HOA authority I have ever seen. Your client not only violated Mr. Nichols's property rights, but did so after receiving a cease and desist letter and while a court motion was pending. I am granting summary judgment in favor of the plaintiff on all counts. We will have a hearing on damages next month, but I can tell you right now, this is going to be expensive for your client." The damages hearing was satisfying in a way I had not expected. Bill presented evidence of the boat's value, the cost of repairs and restoration, my emotional distress, the time I had lost from work dealing with this nightmare, and most importantly, punitive damages to send a message that this behavior would not be tolerated. The HOA's attorney tried to argue for leniency, claiming the association had limited funds and that excessive damages would hurt innocent homeowners. Judge McAllister was unmoved. The HOA is responsible for the actions of its elected officials. If the members elected Miss Pemberton and failed to provide proper oversight, they share in the consequences. Perhaps this will encourage homeowners to be more diligent in who they elect to positions of power. He looked down at his notes. "I am awarding Mr. Nichols $65,000 in compensatory damages, covering the full replacement value of his boat, repair costs, and lost wages. I am further awarding $250,000 in punitive damages. The defendants, including Miss Pemberton personally, are jointly and severally liable for these amounts." I sat in the courtroom, stunned. $315,000. It was more than I had ever imagined. Sharon's criminal trial took place that summer. I attended every day, sitting in the gallery and watching as the prosecution methodically destroyed her defense. She had tried to claim she was just enforcing HOA rules, that she had made honest mistakes, that she was being persecuted for being a strong woman in leadership. The jury did not buy it. The prosecution brought in 4 other victims of Sharon's schemes. There was Martin Wu, whose vintage Mustang had been towed and sold because Sharon claimed it leaked oil on the parking lot. There was Jennifer Collins, whose jet skis had been seized for being too loud, despite no noise complaints ever being filed. There was Robert and Susan Martinez, whose small fishing boat had been taken because it supposedly exceeded the length limit, even though it clearly did not. Each of them told similar stories of Sharon's arbitrary enforcement, her refusal to follow proper procedures, and her aggressive tactics when questioned. The financial records were damning. The prosecution's forensic accountant showed that Sharon had deposited checks from boat sales directly into her personal account, had used HOA funds to pay for personal expenses, including a Caribbean cruise and new furniture, and had falsified meeting minutes to cover her tracks. Her defense attorney, a criminal defense lawyer who specialized in white-collar crime, tried to portray Sharon as a well-meaning volunteer who had made some bookkeeping errors. But on cross-examination, the prosecutor destroyed this narrative. Miss Pemberton, you received Mr. Nichols's cease and desist letter on March 15th, correct? I believe so, yes. And that letter explicitly stated that the boat slip was deeded property and you had no authority to move his boat, correct? The letter made certain claims, yes. Claims that were supported by the recorded deed, which was attached to the letter, correct, I suppose. And 3 days later, on March 18th, you had his boat towed anyway, correct? The boat was in violation of HOA rules. What violation specifically? Sharon hesitated. It was improperly stored. Improperly stored in the boat slip that Mr. Nichols owned and that you had moved your own boat into. I was assigned that slip by the board. Which board meeting was this assignment voted on? Can you point me to the minutes? It was an emergency executive session. Are there minutes from this emergency executive session? I do not believe minutes were kept. How convenient. Miss Pemberton, is it true that you sold Mr. Nichols's boat to your brother-in-law for $4,200? There was an auction. An auction with how many bidders? Sharon's face flushed. I do not recall the exact number. Was your brother-in-law the only bidder? He may have been, yes. And how did you advertise this auction? Where was it held? It was posted on the HOA website. The prosecutor pulled up the HOA website on a screen for the jury. Your Honor, the defense has stipulated that this is the HOA website as it appeared in March of this year. Can you point to anywhere on this site that mentions an auction? Sharon squinted at the screen. It may have been removed. Miss Pemberton, there was no auction, was there? You simply called your brother-in-law and sold him a boat worth $45,000 for $4,000, pocketed the money, and hoped Mr. Nichols would not fight back. Is not that what really happened? No. I was following HOA procedures that you made up yourself and that violate Florida law, correct? The trial lasted 8 days. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: grand theft in the first degree, racketeering, fraud, and conspiracy. Sharon stood as the verdict was read, her face pale, her hands gripping the defense table. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. The judge, a different one from my civil case, sentenced Sharon to 5 years in state prison, with credit for time served. She was also ordered to pay full restitution to all victims, including the $315,000 she owed me from the civil judgment. The 2 other board members, Patricia Underwood and Richard Chen, took plea deals, receiving probation and community service in exchange for their testimony against Sharon. The Sandpiper Cove HOA was in chaos after the trial. Half the board resigned. Homeowners were furious about the legal fees and judgment that would have to be paid from HOA funds and a special assessment. And there was talk of dissolving the association entirely and reforming under new bylaws with strict oversight provisions. I attended a special meeting that fall where the remaining homeowners voted on how to move forward. The room was packed, angry voices overlapping as people demanded answers. How had Sharon been allowed to do this? Why had no one stopped her? What safeguards would prevent this from happening again? A new board was elected, with explicit term limits and financial oversight requirements. Every expenditure over $500 would require approval from 2 board members. All meeting minutes would be professionally recorded and published within 48 hours. And most importantly, any action affecting individual property rights would require a vote of the full membership, not just the board. The HOA's insurance covered most of my judgment, though the homeowners were hit with a special assessment of $2,000 each to cover the remainder and the legal fees. I felt a little bad about that, but as Bill reminded me, they had elected Sharon. They had not paid attention to what she was doing. Sometimes consequences were necessary to create change. Frank Russo, Sharon's brother-in-law, was never charged criminally. Prosecutors decided he had been duped by Sharon and had cooperated fully once he learned the truth. He did, however, lose the $4,000 he had paid for my boat, as that money was forfeited as proceeds of crime. My boat, my beautiful Sea Ray, took months to fully restore. The scratches on the hull required professional buffing and repainting. I had to replace all the electronics, install new cushions, and even replace some of the deck hardware that had been damaged during the illegal tow. The insurance money covered most of it, but I put in countless hours of labor myself, wanting to erase every trace of Sharon's violation. The first time I took her out after the restoration, on a perfect Saturday morning in October, I motored slowly out of the marina and into the intracoastal waterway. My slip, my proper deeded slip, was empty behind me, waiting for my return. Sharon's gaudy cabin cruiser had been sold by the bank after her conviction, and the slip it had been stored and remained vacant. I opened up the throttle once I cleared the no-wake zone, feeling the Sea Ray respond beneath me, the bow lifting as we picked up speed. The wind whipped through my hair, the sun warmed my face, and for the first time in months I felt completely at peace. The nightmare was over. Justice had been served. My property rights had been vindicated. I cruised down to Hollywood Beach, just as I had planned to do on that Friday when I discovered my boat missing. I anchored in the same spot I always did, a quiet area just north of the fishing pier, and sat on the deck with a cold beer and a sandwich. Other boats drifted nearby, their occupants enjoying the same perfect October weather. An older couple on a nearby sailboat waved at me. "Beautiful boat," the man called out. "Thanks," I called back. "She has been through a lot, but we made it." I did not elaborate, and they did not ask. Out here on the water, none of that mattered. The HOA drama, the legal battles, the theft and recovery, it all felt distant and small compared to the endless blue sky and the gentle rocking of the waves. That evening, I returned to Sandpiper Cove Marina as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I guided the Sea Ray carefully into my slip, the slip that was legally and unquestionably mine, and secured the mooring lines. Julio was walking down the dock, making his evening rounds, and he stopped to watch me work. "Good day on the water?" he asked. "The best in a long time," I said. He nodded, understanding. "I am glad things worked out for you, Derek. What that woman did, it was not right." I felt terrible that I could not stop the tow. "You did not have a choice, Julio. You were put in an impossible position. I never blamed you. Still, I should have called you immediately before they took the boat. Maybe you could have stopped them." Maybe, but it would not have changed what Sharon was willing to do. Some people, they get a little bit of power and it corrupts them completely. She was always going to push until someone pushed back hard enough. Julio smiled. "Well, you pushed back pretty hard." 5 years in prison, that is serious. She earned every day of it, I said, and I meant it. Over the following months, life at Sandpiper Cove slowly returned to normal. The new HOA board was competent and professional, focusing on actual community needs like landscaping, building maintenance, and organizing social events. They did not try to seize anyone's property or make up arbitrary rules. It was boring in the best possible way. I became more active in the community, attending HOA meetings regularly, and serving on a committee to review and update the governing documents. We worked with a lawyer who specialized in HOA law to create clear, legal bylaws that respected property rights, while still allowing the association to maintain common areas and enforce reasonable standards. One evening during a committee meeting, a woman I had not met before raised her hand. "I just want to say, Derek, thank you for fighting back against Sharon. I know a lot of us were scared of her, or we just went along to avoid conflict. But you stood up for your rights, and because of that, all of us are better protected now." There were murmurs of agreement around the table. I felt my face flush. I appreciate that, but honestly, I was just trying to get my boat back. I did not set out to reform the HOA or become some kind of activist. "Sometimes that is how change happens," another homeowner said. "Someone gets pushed too far and they decide enough is enough. You could have given up, paid the fees, moved on. But you did not, and we all benefit from that." After the meeting, several people came up to shake my hand or thank me personally. It was gratifying in a way I had not expected. I had spent so many months focused on my own violation, my own loss, that I had not really considered the broader impact of holding Sharon accountable. The criminal restitution payments came slowly. Sharon's assets were limited. A small amount of equity in her condo and a modest retirement account, both of which were seized to pay victims. I would probably never see the full $315,000, but the insurance money had already covered my actual losses, so the rest felt like a bonus. More importantly, I had my boat back, my slip back, and my peace of mind back. Every weekend that I took the Sea Ray out, every sunset cruise and fishing trip and lazy afternoon anchored in the bay felt like a small victory. Sharon had tried to take this away from me, but she had failed. 2 years after Sharon's arrest, I received a letter from the Florida Department of Corrections. Sharon was eligible for early release after serving 3 years due to good behavior and prison overcrowding. The letter asked if I wanted to submit a victim impact statement for the parole board to consider. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had first opened that devastating letter informing me my boat had been sold, and thought about what I wanted to say. Part of me wanted to demand she serve her full sentence, to argue that 3 years was not enough for what she had done. But another part of me, the part that had healed and moved on, did not see the point. I wrote a brief statement acknowledging the harm Sharon's actions had caused, expressing hope that she had learned from her mistakes, but also noting that the damage to victims extended beyond financial losses to include stress, anxiety, and loss of trust in community institutions. I sent it off and tried not to think about it. Sharon was released 4 months later. I learned this from another homeowner who had tracked the case more closely than I had. Apparently, Sharon moved in with family in Georgia and was working at a retail job, slowly paying back the restitution she owed. She would be on probation for 5 years and was prohibited from serving in any HOA leadership position for the rest of her life. I hoped she had learned something from the experience, but I did not spend much time thinking about it. My focus was on the future, not the past. That summer, I met a woman named Teresa Richards at a marina social event. She was a marine biologist who had just moved to Fort Lauderdale for a research position studying coral reef restoration. She had grown up sailing in San Diego and was looking to buy a boat to explore the Florida coastline. We started talking about different boat types, good places to dive, the best anchorages in the Keys, and before I knew it, 3 hours had passed. I asked her if she wanted to go out on the Sea Ray the following weekend, and she agreed. That first boat trip led to a second, then a third, and by fall we were spending every weekend on the water together. Teresa loved the boat almost as much as I did, and she brought a knowledge of marine ecosystems that made every trip an adventure. She would point out different fish species, explain the health of the seagrass beds we passed over, and share her passion for ocean conservation. One evening, as we sat on the deck of the Sea Ray watching dolphins play in our wake, Teresa asked me about the boat's history. I had mentioned that I had been through some trouble with the HOA, but I had not gone into details. I told her the whole story, from Sharon moving her boat into my slip, to the theft and auction, to the criminal trial and eventual conviction. Teresa listened quietly, her expression shifting from disbelief to anger to satisfaction as I described how justice had ultimately prevailed. "That is insane," she said when I finished. "I cannot believe someone would do that, and over a boat slip." "It was not really about the boat slip," I said. "It was about power and control. Sharon wanted to feel important, to have authority over other people. The boat slip was just the excuse." "Well, I am glad you fought back. This boat is too special to let someone steal her," I smiled. "The boat is definitely special. But honestly, the whole experience taught me something important. Property rights matter. Documentation matters. And sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, even when it is exhausting and expensive and you just want it to be over. Because if you do not, people like Sharon win, and they keep doing it to the next person." Teresa nodded. "My dad always said that evil prevails when good people do nothing. You did something, and it made a difference." We sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. The Sea Ray rocked gently beneath us, safe and secure and exactly where she belonged. 3 years after Sharon's conviction, Sandpiper Cove Marina Estates had become a model community. The new bylaws were referenced in HOA management seminars as an example of how to balance community standards with individual property rights. The board was professional and transparent, publishing detailed financial reports and meeting minutes. Homeowners were engaged and informed, attending meetings regularly and participating in community decisions. I was elected to the board myself, serving a 2-year term as treasurer. I made sure every dollar was accounted for, every expenditure properly approved, and every homeowner treated fairly. It was boring work, but important work, and I took it seriously. The irony was not lost on me. I had never wanted anything to do with HOA politics, had avoided meetings and ignored most communications before Sharon's theft of my boat. But going through that experience had shown me how important good governance was, and how much damage bad leadership could do. During my tenure on the board, we dealt with the usual issues: landscaping disputes, parking complaints, a leak in the community pool that required expensive repairs. But we also implemented programs that brought the community together: monthly social events, a community garden, a dock party every summer where homeowners could show off their boats and share stories. At one of these dock parties, I stood on the bow of the Sea Ray, now 7 years old but still in pristine condition, and looked around at my neighbors. Julio was there, retired now but still hanging around the marina because it was his second home. Teresa was talking to a group of younger homeowners about a reef cleanup project she was organizing. the new HOA president, a retired accountant named Margaret Chen, Richard Chen's sister, ironically, who was determined to restore her family name, was grilling burgers and making sure everyone had enough to eat. This was what community was supposed to be, I thought. People coming together, respecting each other's property and rights, solving problems cooperatively instead of through petty tyranny. It had taken a crisis to get here, a criminal conviction and hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and judgments. But we had learned from it, and we were better for it. As the party wound down and people drifted back to their condos, Teresa and I stayed on the boat, sitting in the cockpit under the stars. The marina was quiet now, just the gentle lapping of water against hulls and the distant sound of traffic on the coastal highway. "You know what I was thinking today," Teresa said. "What is that? You should write this all down." The whole story, what happened with Sharon, the trial, how the community changed. It is an important story about standing up for your rights and not letting bullies win. I laughed. I do not think anyone wants to read about HOA drama. Are you kidding? Everyone hates their HOA. This is a story about one person who fought back and won. That is inspiring. Maybe, I said, or maybe some stories are better lived than told. But sitting there that night, I started thinking about everything that had happened, how a simple property dispute had escalated into theft and criminal prosecution, how one woman's abuse of power had united a community, and how fighting for what was right, even when it seemed hopeless, had ultimately prevailed. The Sea Ray was more than just a boat to me now. She was a symbol of perseverance, of refusing to accept injustice, of the importance of documentation and legal rights, and standing up to bullies. Every time I turned the key and heard the engines rumble to life, every time I cast off the lines and motored out into the intracoastal, I remembered why I had fought so hard. Sharon Pemberton had tried to take my boat, my property, my peace of mind. She had moved her boat into my private slip, had my vessel towed and sold at a fraudulent auction, and thought she would get away with it. But she had underestimated my determination, my willingness to fight, and the legal system's ultimate commitment to justice. She was in Georgia now, working retail and paying restitution, her HOA queen days long behind her. I was here in Fort Lauderdale on my boat in my slip, living my best life. Justice had been served, not just for me but for everyone Sharon had victimized, and the community was stronger because of it. As Teresa and I finally locked up the boat and walked back to my condo that night, I looked back at the Sea Ray one more time, her white hull gleaming under the dock lights, secure in the slip that was legally and unquestionably mine. Tomorrow we would take her out again, down to Key Largo maybe, diving on the reef and enjoying the freedom that came with owning a boat in South Florida. But tonight, I was content just knowing she was there, safe, protected by proper documentation and a community that had learned the hard way about the importance of good governance. Sharon's legacy was not the chaos she created, but the positive changes that came from stopping her. And my legacy, I hoped, would be showing that ordinary people could fight back against petty tyrants and win. The nightmare was over. The boat was mine, and the water was waiting for tomorrow's adventures.